So we'll wait just a few moments for folks to get into the room. But I want to make sure that we are live. I'm going to bring up a little placeholder, if you will.
Yep.
And we'll be ready to rock and roll. So give it about 15 or 20 seconds and let the folks get comfortable, get situated. I don't know if it's lunchtime where you are or breakfast, but whatever it is, let's make sure that we are ready to have a fantastic conversation. So we'll go live in 15 to 20 seconds. Good stuff. All right, Prem. You know what? I really appreciate you for joining me, good man. We have a lot to talk about, so much to talk about. And, I think one of the fun things about all of this is that, we get to do these conversations. We can do them spur of the moment. We can do them scheduled. We have plenty of time to sort of plan what it is that we're going to say to one another. And then others, we just say, let's riff. And so somewhere in between today, I want to see if we can riff. So let's start with first and foremost, Prem. How are you? Coming off of a long weekend. How are you?
It's bright and sunny in Seattle today, Torin, which doesn't happen every day. So I'm in a good mood. I'm doing good. We had a good weekend. How about you?
So it's funny you start with weather because it's not bright and sunny here in Baltimore. It's overcast. It's been raining all night and all morning, but it looks like I'm still in the good category. I actually feel really good because I've been looking forward to this conversation. And I want to start here, with us being in the middle of the playoffs. I'm a huge basketball fan, huge fan. And one of the things that I was sharing with my Kings is that these players today, they seem to run at a really high pace. They move up and down the court. So I don't know if you're a basketball fan. I don't know if you're rooting for a particular team, but I want to start with that. I want to start with, how do you play the game? How do you determine the speed in which humanly is going to move throughout the market? Is there a playbook that you are referencing? Is there sort of like game film, game tape? How does humanly decide how they're going to play the game quarter to quarter?
Yeah, really good question. I am a basketball fan, but my team is the Sonics, so rest in peace. Hopefully we'll get them back at some point. But when I think great teams, and I'm not Generation Z, so I think of the 96, 72, and 10 Chicago Bulls, and they built that team based on diversity. You had Rodman, who was good at what he did. He was a very good rebounder. You had Pippen doing his thing. So to me, a lot of these great teams they're teams, and teams are components of people that are bringing diverse things to the game. And I think that's how I think about building teams here at Humanly. As far as certainly there's a lot of correlation to reviewing film. We're using tools like Gong to look at our sales calls. We're looking at interviews we're doing. One thing I found about myself when I was reviewing my interview film is I speak too fast, and that is not good for candidates where English is a second language, or when I'm speaking over 150 words per minute. So I think we can all learn and grow. If you're at a startup or any company, the goal of a company is to grow, and it will not grow if we're not individually growing. So.
Yeah, if you're out, put it in the chat, which team you are focused on, which team you are rooting for to win. Love to see some of your comments in the chat. What coast are you on? Are you on the East Coast or West Coast? Prim, I'm curious. I want to double click on that. When you talk about using tools like Gong, when you talk about recognizing that your speed of delivery, your pace of conversation, that those were impediments, or certainly areas in which you should pause, reconsider how you showed up, tools that may help the team. Does the team really contribute to that conversation? In a sense, do you have assistant coaches that may see something different in the game film. They may see some different market movement, a threat from a competitor, a new emerging consideration. How do you incorporate their observation, their consideration, their acumen in the strategy for how to play the humanly way?
Looks like we have a Celtics fan, Bob. Hey, Bob. Yeah, no, I think it's incredibly important. Growth and growing as an individual takes a lot of support and coaching, but it isn't. But there's a lot of things you're doing yourself as well. So we give access to those calls to others on the team. They can kind of learn from what everyone else is doing. I think from a coaching standpoint, I think very much the role of leadership and management at Humanly is an active coaching and getting the most out of each individual. I'll often hear founders or hiring managers say things like, oh, that was a bad hire when someone isn't performing. Oftentimes it's because it's bad coaching, bad onboarding, bad management. It's not actually the person themselves is just not empowered to reach their full potential. So I think the only way to get your company to the full potential is to get your employees to their full potential. And doing that requires active coaching. So not just coaching when someone's asking for help, but being a part of it, watching what they're doing. In sports, the coaches watch the games. In many companies, the coaches are not, the managers are not watching the game. The game's happening in a meeting somewhere else, but can you still have a participation effort via recording or via checking in after, things like that?
So Prem, let's take it back to the beginning. When I look at your profile, I don't see in such recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see in such a deep experience in talent acquisition, having sat in that function, so to speak, having had to really review requisitions and talk to hiring managers about discovery calls and workforce planning, so to speak. And it's not to suggest that it's not there. It's not what's pronounced in your bio. So take a moment, if you would, and just paint a picture for individuals. Who is Prem?
Yep. Yeah, and I can get to a personal level, but on that topic, I've spent my career building solutions for HR and TA buyers. So I think it certainly there are a lot of folks right now that are throwing solutions, and AI is a solution. It's a good solution for a lot of things, but they're throwing solutions at customers instead of, a solution in search of a problem instead of being obsessed with the problem. So while I have not been sat in a recruiter seat, in my 10 years at Microsoft, I spent over half of those as a buyer of these HR solutions, working directly with our TA business and with our HR business. And a part of that to me was like really understanding what the problems are, because a lot of these problems, some could be solved by AI. I know we'll get there, and very well. Others might not need to be. So I think when we started the company, the first thing I did is buy coffee for 30 recruiters, sit down with them and understand their pains and their problems. And what I found is many of them also didn't have a lot of recruiting or TA experience coming in. So I followed the same process in learning the job as them. And then I began doing a lot of interviews myself as I became a founder and a manager. But yeah, I think there's multiple paths, but what you absolutely can't do is just focus on the tech and be so obsessed with a solution that you're no longer obsessed with the problem. I think that's the path to failure.
So I want to stay there for a moment. When you say Microsoft, you've got exposure to some of the biggest logos, brands, organizations on the planet. You have what appears to be an infinite amount of resources, or certainly access to resources where you can ideate inside of the organization. I often used to tell people Waylay. I would use an acronym Waylay, wage earner, act like an entrepreneur. You had access to that. You were earning a wage inside of Microsoft, but had the ability to act like an entrepreneur. What did you see? What was the experience, if you recall, what was the experience inside of Microsoft or one of the others that said, I got to do this on my own? And I'm not going to do this trying to build a solution, searching for a problem. I see an absolute problem and I'm going to get at that particular one.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, certainly felt at Microsoft like an entrepreneur, and many of the products I worked on were newer, and our VPs were like VCs in many ways. We would pitch them for budget so there was some commonality. But to answer your question, it really starts from like a deep kind of personal experience with the problem. And when I graduated from the University of Washington, I was applying for jobs. I was very naive. I assumed that when I applied to a job, I would hear back. Doesn't really happen a lot when you're applying out of university. There was a few experiences through the interview process, through the application process, that left me with a really negative candidate experience. And that reflection on employer brand like carries with me today. There's like a few companies, and I'm not a bitter person, but there's a few companies that their interview processes 10 years ago were or 15 years ago were so negative that I just wouldn't apply there anymore. And when the recruiters message me, I'm not responding. So that candidate experience is where the pain started. But then when I got to Microsoft, I saw, the power of technology, and I was there during all three CEOs. So when I started, Bill Gates, and then he left a month after I started, not because I started, but yeah, he left. And then we had Ballmer, who was much more business minded, numbers driven, financial outcome driven. And then Satya, who was very much empowering and engaging of the workforce and the workforce of engineers to achieve. And now it's getting a little bit in the same way as like Satya is still doing his thing, but it is there is that a little bit of that Ballmer coming in. Not a bit. This is a good thing in many ways, but the culture has changed there. But when I was there, I saw that the reason why I had those negative candidate experiences were not because hiring teams and recruiters were bad or trying to ignore candidates. They just did not have the tools to engage at scale with the volume that was coming in because the friction to apply was so low. And at the same time, working at Microsoft, I saw other functions like sales, like marketing, that did have tools to engage at scale with people raising their hand because they're interested in your brand. So that was kind of some of the foundational things in my journey.
So, you talk about friction to apply being low. I've worked with organizations in the past in a consulting capacity where they've instituted knockout questions. They've done things to see if we could limit or increase that friction, if you will. Are you a fan of that? Are you a fan of making it, and not that humanly does it, but organizations making that friction a bit more that one has to hop through, whether it be assessments, whether it be knockout questions? Where do you sit as it relates to this whole application process? Because that is just one of the three personas. You have the candidate, you have the applicant, and you have the prospect. Where do you sit as it relates to being an applicant?
So where I sit as it relates to being an applicant, and even for the other personas, like there's where I think we need to get to and the best we can do right now. So I'll talk about both of those things. But from an applicant standpoint, I certainly, to me, this isn't a matter of the company screening me or interviewing me. It's also me screening and interviewing the company. So I want to get my questions answered too. And that's hard to do if it's a kind of one-way knockout. I want to tell my full story. I don't want to be right now we're like in these inbound situations, 95% of candidates are being ignored, and we're choosing who we ignore based on matching 2 pieces of paper to see how many words they have in common. So job description and LinkedIn profile or resume, all the sourcing tools are generally using keyword matching or some form of it. So I don't want to be reduced to 4 keyword sets on a piece of paper. I'd like to talk to, or I'd like to engage with the company. So that's how I feel about it as a candidate.
So, you raise an interesting point. And one of the things that I said last week when I put up a post, just reminding people that you and I would be in conversation, I actually made reference to something that I've heard, well, forever. One of those statistics is that recruiters only look at resumes for 6 seconds. I've never believed that number, but nonetheless, it's one of those war stories, those legends that continues to sit in our space. Another one of those is that Black sounding names, ethnic sounding names, they don't get the callbacks that others receive. And so last week, I made reference to yet another recent story of a young African-American woman who had gone through, she's been interviewing, or shall I say, applying for the last 9 months, if I'm not mistaken, and had not received callbacks until she changed her name to a more mainstream white sounding name, actually receiving callbacks from some of the people who had ghosted, ignored, or declined her previously. The beauty in that is that I said humanly touches everyone, no matter what their name is, no matter what their geography is, humanly makes it so that every person receives some degree of engagement from the organization. Talk a bit about the Humanly solution and why that is. Can I use the word game changer? I don't want to sound, really hyperbolic, but that is game changing. Not, there's something else to be said about 800 resumes, or applicants. But can I use the word game changing?
Absolutely. We were talking sports earlier, so that fits. But to answer your question, Torrin, so to kind of reframe what's happening now, and Humanly is generally focused on higher volume entry-level roles, mid-level roles, 0 to 5 years of experience. This is across hourly and professional. So not for everyone, but in those processes, when we have a customer that'll get 4,000 applicants in a short period of time for a given job. And it's impossible to talk to all 4,000 right now. And so we're using the shortcuts you described to try and figure out who we should talk to. And that's why you get to that 7 second, and there is some truth to that. We've seen some research showing that when it's closer later in the day, 3, 4, 5 p.m., those resumes get less time. And then Fridays are less if you're applying last versus first. So there are things like that, but I will start by saying, like, these TA teams and recruiters are some of like the smartest, hardest working people I've ever met. They just are not given the tools. So my answer and Humanly's answer is not to create more shortcuts or ways of screening out, but to create a process where you're talking to everyone. If I had 4,000 people apply and I was trying to find the best person for the role, I wouldn't interview 5 and then pick the best out of the 4,000. I'd talk to everyone and then pick the best out of the 4,000, but which is really hard to do without the right technology. So that's one thing. And then we're also not just trying to fill a role. What we're really trying to do is build a healthy pipeline for your next role, for your future role. If you're and another, like, I'll talk to you more specifically about what we do there, but another benefit from engaging with all 4,000, if you're a B2C company, oftentimes your candidates are your best customers. Disney Parks jobs candidates are spending 8 times more money at Disney as the average consumer. Starbucks candidates are buying more Starbucks coffee. So there's more reasons than just making the right hire and building the right pipeline to engage with everyone. So what we're doing is we want to get everyone into a 2-way conversation. We do this via chat agent, phone, and now we're doing some on the video side. So instead of waiting a week to talk to someone to get your questions answered. You're being screened and getting your questions answered right away in a matter of hours. So can we take you through the initial application, get you right away into the phone screen, and then perhaps to an interview? So if we can speed that up and do it for everyone, then when we're matching, it's no longer just matching people who have the right words on a piece of paper, but matching people that, based on the conversation you've had with them, fit from a skills and other aspects, fit the role the best.
So do you have someone on the team humanly that sits in the capacity of really advising the organizations? Because let's face it, no one wants to be one of 4,000. No one wants to be one of 400 resumes. And quite frankly, we really don't even want to be one of 40. We want to be that one of one. But I don't know how humanly wins. Does humanly win because we do have 4,000 and we can apply our technology to touch all 4,000? Or does humanly win by saying from an advisory capacity, let's do this, let's tweak this about the process, let's do this so we can get that number down to something much lower than 4,000? How do you all sort of operate and advise and work as business and collaboration partners with the clients that you are servicing?
Yeah, so we generally win by reducing time to hire from 44 days to 5 to 6 days. And a big part of that is by allowing you to now have everyone get into these screening steps, everyone that applies and meets basic criteria, and doing that very quickly. So in a matter of hours, we're now, or minutes to do the actual steps. But if you're also doing the full interview, things like that, it matter of hours. But by doing that right away, same day, the speed by which you get the right smaller group. So we're taking that 4,000 and turning it into that same 5 that you have human time for, but that 5 is now based on talking to everyone and also creating an outcome for every candidate. So the outcome is not always, of course, that you make it to the next step, but it might be, okay, here's some other roles, or if they're a silver medalist, they can be placed in the ATS as such, so that you might engage with them later. Maybe it's a university hiring scenario and they haven't graduated yet, but they meet other criteria. So by talking to everyone, you're also kind of setting yourself up to reduce time to hire in the next hiring cycle. So that's generally, but to answer your question, yeah, I mean, a lot of this is understanding the customer. Like when I'll go back to being obsessed with the problem, where AI, like any technology, can make things happen faster, more efficiently, and at a higher quality. But if you don't have the right process, the right people, it can also make bad things happen faster, more efficiently bad, and at a higher quality of bad. So to me, it's a big part of what we do is getting to understand the intricacies of the customer's specific process. I was just a few days ago on site at a customer going through their end-to-end workflow and then identifying where it makes sense to have AI or technology engage and where it doesn't. So that I think that's extremely important. And we have a customer success team that does that.
I'm really, really glad that you touched on, not escalating bad processes, but slowing down enough to observe what is working, is not possibly working, and how do we change that. We are 25 minutes in. It's only the second time that you've used the acronym AI or talked about AI. And so I really, really appreciate you. I want to take you back just for a moment, Prem, because I want to spend some time talking about customers. We're going to get to Noom, the case study that we did inside of the Reducing Bias in HR using artificial intelligence. You can find the full report over at Plum's website. We also are going to have a QR code in a moment so that you can get the Noom case study, which I think is fascinating. But I want to go back just a bit. Your very first client, your very first company, the one that you brought on board, Humanly is live. It's in the marketplace. If you can, talk about that very first customer and what it was that made them believe that humanly was the solution that they needed to have? And are they now a legacy customer, or has the organization perhaps evolved past the type of service and support that they needed?
Yeah, good question. So our very first customer, so there's our Seattle-based company. They are a clothing rental as a service company, Armoire, and yes, we've continued to work with them. They there is also our first like enterprise customer, but in both cases, I'll start with the very first customer. So to me, the great thing about this is, while there are so many solutions out there, and one reason I haven't mentioned AI as much, I haven't hit my quota. I need to mention at least. I'm just kidding, but the one reason I haven't mentioned, there's a lot of solutions, and AI is also just a very general term. There's a lot of forms of AI, but to me, like the exciting part of my job is everyone that I talk to gets the problem. So when I talk to TA folks, they are drowning in having to use like 100 different tools. When they show me their web browsers, they have like 50 tabs open. There's like a tool for SMSing candidates, a tool for emailing them, a video interviewing tool, an ATS, a sourcing tool, reference check, background. So there's a lot of noise on the solution side, but the problem is clear. And the problem with the problem is time to hire hasn't changed in the last 25 years. So like at scale. So clearly the problem is still there. I do feel some of the newer technologies have given us an opportunity to now solve some of those problems. But that very first customer, they were a small company, a startup, and they had that same, even though they just had 2 roles, they had the same, how do I engage with all these applicants on my 2 roles? You go to enterprises and they have many more roles, but the problem of engaging with candidates at scale is something that is felt. And when I talk to TA leaders, they feel it too. And it's hard to engage at scale. It's even harder to engage at scale and limit and not be biased, as some of the examples you mentioned before. But we need to get better.
So let's talk Noom. Noom is a privately held organization. They provide weight loss, fitness, and mental health services through a digital app. And when they came to you, they were in what I would consider to be one of their second phases of growth. And Prim, what we captured in the report was that, one, and I'm reading this directly from the report, they faced 3 distinct challenges. 1, hyper growth in recruitment. Number 2, prioritizing DEI efforts. And then the third problem that they were facing is nurturing passive candidates. You have made it very clear that diversity and inclusion are important to you, to the organization, and hopefully to those that you are supporting. How is it that you all were able to help Noom in the calamity? I want to use that really, really strong word, the problem, the challenge that they were facing.
Yeah, no, and I certainly, more diverse teams are better teams. And if we are trying to grow, to me, adding to your culture with culture adds, and versus creating an homogenous culture is going to be how you grow. You need to build towards where you're getting. And part of that is adding diverse perspectives, diverse ways of doing things, diverse backgrounds, diverse genders, ethnicities. So ways of thinking. So I certainly feel that is important. And if others don't, that's great, because now I have an advantage. But no, I'm kidding. Like, everyone should care about that. Absolutely. It's how you build a company, by bringing together diverse people. I don't see another way to do it. Yeah, with Noom specifically, they certainly leaned in there, and that was great to see. The thing for them was, one was being able to, like, we want to help you create a healthy flow, a healthy pipeline of candidates. So identifying when you have gaps, not everyone identifies that. So they're pretty ahead, and they knew that, hey, we are not getting the level of diversity that we need to with our candidates. So giving them the tools to engage both with our database of 600 million candidates, but with the world at large through our campaign system, was one way of bringing in new candidates. And then the other piece was re-engagement. So it really is just a matter of going out and talking to the world and bring in people that are that you think would be good for the role. With one of the things that we're really focused on, it's not just about sending a sourcing email, and those can be, we make them very personalized, but it's the next step. So in our emails that go out, you can embed a link to a chat to be screened as a next step, to get your questions answered, to schedule. So I think like pulling people in, because part of selling to any candidate, not just candidates that are diverse from your current population, is parceling out your employer brand in every moment. So I think that's another piece of what we were doing there. Is Noom has an amazing brand. So how does that best shine? And then the last thing I'll say that was great for them and others is you can't really change what you're not actively measuring. So reporting and understanding the data is really important. Some of the most fascinating data I've looked at in our journey, and this was more of a research effort, not something we productized, but we were looking at, this wasn't for Noom, just to be clear, but just with another customer, not Noom, we found that across 300 Zoom calls, so this was a company struggling with gender diversity. They had a lot of men, and they didn't know why. When we looked at the Zoom calls, women were literally getting 8 minutes less to speak. And that went up as high as 12 minutes in these Zoom calls. So you can't change what you can't measure. And now almost everything is measurable. So there are opportunities to make those changes. Going back to Noom, the specific ways they were measuring is through using our reporting tools to look at conversion of different candidate sets and how many they were getting into particular flows.
You know, and they also suggested that when they brought the Humanly solution into their product mix, that they were able to perform some customized searches across their CRM, that they were able to, restart past conversations with folks that had been in the pool before. And it's long been said that, you know, a number of these organizations, the gold is already in the ATS, it's already in the CRM. In many cases, it's already there, but that we've ignored it. And so I appreciated even today, Humanly being able to positively exploit the fact that, listen, you all have built relationship. There was something in the past that was of interest, that was ideal to this particular person. Let's circle back and see if that still exists for them. I really appreciated the custom search and the passive toiling of candidate.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I oftentimes when people ask, you know, where do I find my best candidate, you probably already met them. And the thing right now is, and this is not a recruiter or TA problem, it's a technology problem, but like what we're doing is we're first getting all your candidates in one place. So that's all your candidates from your applicant tracking system. That's our database of candidates. That's employees that connect their LinkedIn so we can look at their networks. But once everyone is in one place, we are able to then engage and message with them. And I think the other piece of that is it's not just about having profiles of people. The candidates we're in having conversations with about 250,000 candidates a month. And by keeping engaged with candidates, you have their information more updated. So their qualified, interested, available information. Have they moved to San Diego? So I think it's about having all that data in one place, but it needs to be the right data too. It can't be a record that's 3 years old, 4 years old. And oftentimes we're seeing ATSs where, because the TA teams don't have the tools to keep this stuff updated, a lot of the records are unusable.
So I have a question from the audience, and I mentioned Plum earlier. You and Humanly, you all play well in the same sandbox, so it was no conflict of interest there. Part of the reason why I'm so extremely grateful and glad both you and Humanly and Plum participated in our reducing bias in HR using artificial intelligence. Question from the field is, what's Humanly's point of view as it relates to AI supporting Indigenous First Nation populations in Canada?
Yeah, I went and spoke at a conference in Arizona last week, and this was more so having to do with, this was a group of a national conference of U.S. based Native and Indigenous populations, not so much, not the Canadian side, but I really dove into this. So the point of view is that great talent comes from all sources, and some sources have less access to it, and that population is certainly one that has less access to it. So I think that there's a few things we can do. So our goal is anyone that applies to a job gets into a conversation with the company. So it's not an email that says you aren't a fit based on the keywords in your resumes. Access being a problem to that population and other minority populations. When you don't have access, you might there are a lot of steps missed, like access, for example, to resume coaching. So someone should not be discounted from getting a job. One, because someone's being biased and seeing names that are different or things like that, but they also shouldn't be the ATSs shouldn't bias against them, which the ATSs are doing, not on purpose, but by the fact that they might be referring to things differently or using different language in their resume. And I feel like a lot of underrepresented groups are not getting trained on the game, and it should not be a game. But right now it is somewhat of a game to build the perfect optimized resume to be picked up by an ATS. So that is something I want to get out of. I want a world where everyone gets a screen and eventually everyone gets an interview, which can be done with technology. So if you really want to pick the best person for the job, you'd like interview everyone. That's just impossible right now. But that's where we're trying to get to. So it's a bit of a more generalized answer, but I think another thing I'll mention quick, and I mentioned that conference, but I've spoken to a lot of different diverse groups. I spent some time with Neil Barnett, who runs Microsoft's autism spectrum disorder hiring program. And what we found through that with that group is pretty interesting, but it's just very clear expectation setting for the candidate. And the reason I say it's interesting is pretty much everything we found that benefits these underrepresented groups actually benefits all candidates. So, but making sure that everyone gets that opportunity is kind of what we're after. Then the last thing I'll say, this is coming from a group I worked with on the veteran side, another underrepresented group. And what we're also looking at is like, how do we look at non-traditional experience? So if you have wedding planning in your experience, it's a great job, but maybe you want to move into customer success. The words wedding and planning shouldn't be the keywords that the matching tool is using. Can we identify that there's a high probability they have strong communication skills, organization skills, punctuality, and use that map of inferred skills and the conversation to then match versus just the words on the paper?
You clearly articulate, demonstrate, and model that diversity and inclusion are important to you. How does the current climate that we are in now maybe inform how you help the team to go out and have those conversations in the marketplace?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there is in some ways, like the term DEI is not fully understood. I think when you describe what it is and why it's important, it's kind of hard to disagree with. And really, it's a process of finding the best team. The best teams are the most diverse teams. And if you want the best team, then you need to have some representation of strategy there. And you need to have a lot of representation from a candidate standpoint. So how we navigate talking about this is one is we're like just own that we care about it. But really, at the end of the day, there's a lot of ways to build a great team, and all of them include some level of DEI. But what we want to do is like what our customers really, really want is time and money savings. So you lead with that, and in the conversations, quality is you're not just going to save time and money and hire candidates that aren't going to be good candidates. You want to save the time and money and hire the best candidates. So while we're saving you time and money by talking to everyone, we're getting you the highest quality, and a part of high quality is most certainly diversity around how we think, diversity around our backgrounds, diversity around how we build. So when we say a healthy pipeline, a big part of that is around diversity, and then creating things as simple as in our chat and AI conversations. If you're building on, if let's say you're using ChatGPT, great tool, and it really helped make consumers comfortable with AI, but ChatGPT is trained on a biased data source, the internet. 70% of the web pages, or 60% the web pages, were written by a small group of native English speaking men of a certain race. So the like ZipRecruiter did a study, and I promise Torrin I won't randomly go off, but ZipRecruiter did a study showing that by just using gender neutral language in job descriptions instead of male gendered language, 72% of job descriptions have male gendered, but by making it neutral, you get like 35% more applicant volume. So we're trying to do the same thing in our AI conversations. And if the AI is trained on the internet, it can't do that because the internet doesn't do that. So I think the words matter as far as inclusivity, that feeling you have when you're in the interview, like the interview itself needs to include all the aspects of DEIB as well.
Words matter, so do the dollars. Recently, 7 million came through in a raise for you in the organization. So I want to say publicly, congratulations there. I have an idea of how you may invest and deploy some of that recent raise, but I'd love to hear it directly from you. So first of all, congratulations. What went into that, and what might you be doing with this recent newfound fortune?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked what we're doing with it, because the fundraise itself, it's a nice milestone, but it doesn't matter until we actually effectuate it. More money in our bank doesn't help our customers until we deployed it to build a better product for them. So what we're going to do is what I'm excited about. So thank you for asking. We're coming off some like Q4 and going into Q1. It's been the highest growth we've ever had. And a lot of that has to do with really focusing on the problem and building something specifically for it. We're not selling to everyone, but for people that have a problem as it relates to entry to mid-level candidate volume, and that being a high volume, we're definitely hitting that hard. Really on the product side. So one thing we're doing is building more relationships with job candidates. And this is not like our customers' candidates, but job candidates out in the world. We're building more of like a career coaching module with AI that allows us to get to know these candidates better, gives them value back in the process, but also gives us the ability to match them to our customers. So can we our own data set versus what is happening right now is most of the companies out there are grabbing profiles from third-party data aggregators that are scraped from LinkedIn. We want to actually get to know these people. So building that career coaching module is one thing. But then the other thing is we're getting much deeper on the way our tool works is you have all your candidates in one place, and then we give you agents through chat phone and we're moving towards voice to be able to have that initial conversation. So can you, when I say talk to all 4,000 candidates and show your employer brand, let them ask questions and screen them, can you do that across all the channels? Because the last thing I want is to see more people with 5 to 20 browser tabs open where they have a different tool for all the different ways they're talking to candidates. So the ATS still exists as an applicant tracking system and as a system of record. I don't need to say what the acronym means to this audience, but as a system of record. But we want to be the layer around that is in all those two-way conversations with candidates, making those applicant lists smaller, screening, scheduling, interviewing. So that's where our focus is and where we're going to be spending more time.
All of those things, I believe, are going to make that experience better. It's going to make the candidate journey better. Have you looked at, have you, the team, have clients, has anyone asked for you to make that first phase of the onboarding better? Or maybe the offer acceptance portion of the process better? Because even there, Prim, we still find organizations dropping the ball, just late in terms of shooting out offer letters, not responding in a timely manner, inconsistency in what is being offered from one person to another. So have you all thought in any way about extending where you can provide value beyond the candidate journey?
Yeah. And that's kind of where my career prior, a lot of it was spent on onboarding, employee engagement, offboarding. So here's what I'll say. Like we want to be the best at one thing. We can't be the best at everything. So the conversation is what we're good at. So having those two-way conversations. So we do have some customers that have started using them for onboarding. And going back to the beginning here, when I was saying, when people say, oh, that person was a bad hire, when you break that down, oftentimes it's not the person was a bad hire, it's the onboarding process was horrible, or they had a bad manager, or they didn't have the right coaching. And as we know, getting that right is really important early. So our ultimate goal is not for you to hire someone, it's for you to hire someone that has the highest employee lifetime value. And what I mean by that's a combination of tenure, engagement, performance. To get that up, you need to get onboarding to happen much faster and to be happening in a way that's empowering the employee. So what we're doing in onboarding right now is simple. It is more of a simple from a scope standpoint. It's using the conversational piece of what we're doing to get feedback, make sure that people are set up for success. We're not going down the route while we can embed with partners to get here. We're not going down the route of ourselves processing like an I-9 or a background check. You would do those via our partners. So
I appreciate that. So we're coming close to close. And so let's land the plane in a way that is a bit more personal. And when I say personal, you know your space in some ways far better than I do. You most certainly know humanly far better than I do. And so I want to land in an area that's personal. One, I'd like for you to share a disappointment, maybe something that the organization attempted to do in the early days, even the earlier part of this year, and we failed at it. Maybe why that's a disappointment. And then I'd want you to close with something that I may not have asked you, but you want the audience to absolutely know about you and your incredible team.
Yeah. So okay. So a couple of things. One is, and I'll get personal, but one thing I'm disappointed in general in the industry, I guess two things. So one is, there is a lot of talk and there are a lot of CEOs that will always say people are our most important asset, but they're not elevating TA leaders to have a seat at the table. And it's like we see this all the time where recruiters are working their butts off, and hiring managers, even while they say, and I'm not saying everyone, there's some great companies. Noom is doing things very well, for example, but there are a lot of these managers that they know in their hearts hiring is really important, and they say it is, and people are important, but they're not putting notes in after, or not showing up late to the interview. So I think that the world owes TA and recruiters more I guess empowerment. So that's one thing that has been disappointing. The other two, I'll make them quick. One thing is I do think there is a lot of like shiny objects. So again, AI is a solution and it can work really well, but there are a lot of companies that are, these thin AI layers, and they don't understand the workflow or the process. And AI doesn't matter if it's not in workflow. It doesn't exist if it's not in your process connected to your ATS. And so that's the second disappointment. And then the third is maybe a more personal disappointment. I think I don't think we shouted our story loud enough, and kind of shying away from in some cases there are scenarios where AI is not the best thing to do. In other cases, we are an AI company, but there are certain types of interactions where, it would be cool to have an AI chat with the face on it and human on it that can have a conversation. But chatbots are not about chatting; they're about transacting and converting. So in many cases, if you're looking at a chatbot, like the best way to convert someone is to give them, they're on their mobile phone. It's not to type a bunch of stuff. It's to input things more quickly or to pull it from another source. So that's one thing I think, really just telling that story, that AI and technology are all solutions, but we need, as vendors, we need to think about all the solutions at our disposal, understand the customer, and then fit this into their workflow, not pick the shiny object and kind of throw it at them. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So here's the deal. I want to just say I thank you for spending some time with myself and with the audience, both today live as well as those that will watch the replay. What I am running across the bottom of the screen is a link for individuals to copy so that they can set up a demo. Would really encourage them to schedule a demo. I'm curious, Prem, the person who does the demo or the demo team, are they really serious? Do they like to have fun? What kind of team do you have behind the scenes doing the humanly demos?
Yeah, and one thing I'll say too is, like, going back to the problem, the way we start the first call, we actually try not to do demo. It's all about getting to know you. In this case, when you're actually asking for a demo, of course we'll give you a demo. But I think understanding that the customer is important. No, we definitely have a fun team. We encourage people to bring themselves to work, and to the extent that they're comfortable with, and we try and create a safe environment for that. It's a fun team. We're constantly laughing. When I was on a flight and had a little extra time last week, so I took our Slack message threads and turned them into an AI punk rock song and sent it to the team, and that was pretty popular. So we're doing things like that all the time, and I think that's created a good culture.
NBA to punk rock, we did it today. Congratulations on the raise. Really appreciate your stewardship, the way that you and Andrew are building team over there at Humanly. If ever there's anything that I can do to help amplify and support the work that you all are doing, simply send me a nudge or a text. But for now, Prem, I want to just say thank you. I appreciate you rocking with us.
Thank you so much, Torin, and thanks to the audience for tuning in.